There is a lot to unpack there. Is it okay if I don't use the mic? Is everyone okay if you may hear me? Oh, we're recording, so please use the mic. All right. Mics make me nervous. Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack there. I wish the little ones didn't show up so late. I'm sure they would have enjoyed seeing that. But we're glad that you guys showed up either way. So thank you for coming. It speaks about false narratives and things like that. And I found that the false narrative and myths about Black people comments to be very interesting, also because it's relevant to propaganda, which is also put out about Black people to propaganda and appropriate myths, right? To make inferior, one race more superior than the other, right? I think, I'm not gonna go into my thoughts, I'm not a panelist, I'm sorry, but we do have 4 panelists that are gonna come up here. I see them smiling at me now. Like, all right, brother, let's get this going. I think they've seen this and they have some thoughts on their mind, which I'd love to unpack. So our first panelist, Salam Binay, is from the majestic highlands of Ethiopia to the multicultural hub of Canada, opens a glimpse to Salam's journey. After completing her bachelor's degree in economics and biology at McEwen University, this very school here, over the past decade, she's delved into various sectors with a focus on service. Her professional career, from sales to marketing to research assistantship at the U of A, that's right, project coordinator, reflect the skills that she has and the experience that she has developed over her time. With service as a guiding light, Salam has contributed locally towards numerous community organizations, including the Nile Valley Foundation, which is a Black library project, if I'm not mistaken, as well as AHC, Ethiopian Community Association, DAYA, the BCW in Action, and more. And I'm sure there's a lot more. Thank you for keeping that short for us. Everyone, please welcome Salam on the line. And our next panelist, Greg Davis. It doesn't say this, but he's a bit of a gardener. Some of you guys don't know a little bit of his personal life. Me and him share a garden in a community garden. Greg is a Jamaican-born globetrotter who made his way to Toronto after school before getting lost for 10 years in Japan. You have to share that story with us. Since 2006, he has been involved in the world of media, working in sales and marketing manager for working in sales and a marketing manager for 3 major publications in Tokyo, Toronto, and Edmonton. Impossible is nothing is one of his creeds he goes by, and central part of his approach to business and problem solving. Now in Edmonton, he's a publisher for Melanistic magazine. Please welcome Greg Davis. Akil Ambrose is a Canadian Vincentian, aspiring Black entrepreneur and former AUS collegiate athlete who suffered a near-death, life-altering injury. Using this experience to fuel himself, he's began the journey to improve in all areas. He is in the process of building his brand, Island Grind, and has started a successful podcast called The Grind Theory. Please welcome Akil. And finally, the person who has gone the easiest on me for bios. Gail Ann William is an educator with over 19 years of experience in Edmonton Public Schools. She is an anti-racism and diversity education consultant. She is a community leader engaged to better young people's lives and many more. Please welcome Gail. Excellent. And to facilitate the panel discussion, we're going to have Miriam come on down and take over the mic.
Wow, how was it?
That's great.
Yeah, thank you. Welcome, amazing panelists here. Really happy that you're here. I just want to ask you, one of you can answer that question. When you listen to things like this or watch a movie like that, what comes in your mind?
Well, I'm holding the mic. And I just wanted to correct, my last name is Wilson. That's okay, but I actually have a new last name as of Sunday past. My lovely bridegroom is sitting over there, and
She's a new bride in town.
so my last name is Mitchell. So again, to answer your question, Miriam, one of the things that impacts me the most is that connection between history and present, and the fact that, as mentioned, and as you highlighted, that we view time as linear when it really isn't. You know, it's a blend. So that really jumps out at me anytime we are taking a look at how we arrived at where we're at, because ultimately the impact that our ancestors have had on us is something that is an inheritance that we carry, that we will pass on. So it really never is linear. There is no past. It actually remains present in each of us.
Very good. Anyone here? And mind you, the audience is going to participate at the end of this, so please don't worry about, you're not speaking, you're going to speak as well, okay? Yeah, as a young person, especially.
So, as a younger person, at least for me, when I saw the documentary, it brings a desire in me to see more of it or to know more, right? Because me coming from the Caribbean, like in schools and stuff like that, we're not taught like the African lineage or anything like that. So it's just like where you come from. You're taught about Caribs and Arawaks, just the people there. You're not taught about the lineage from there. So a lot of the narratives and the things against Black people, it also affects in school because we don't get to learn about that stuff there too. So it just wants me to learn. It just makes me want to learn more. And I think documentaries like this are great because it's going to dive more into those things.
Yeah, good answer.
And just to kind of reiterate what you said, it's finding what truths we haven't really been told, or what half-truths we've been told. So like, growing up in the Caribbean, studying history, we were always taught that the slave trade was a bunch of Europeans sailing in Africa, grabbing a bunch of people, sailing across the Caribbean, and selling us as slaves. And that was it. Triangle trade. Right? But never really getting into the heart of what actually took place. What's the real story? How much of it has been quote unquote whitewashed and hidden?
Yeah.
And so these documentaries, they stimulate that thought process, and hopefully will encourage everyone to kind of dig deeper.
Yeah, that brings me to a second question. I know it brings me to a second question where do Caribbeans or Americans feel that connection with Black Americans or the diasporans, feel that connection to Africa? As you're talking about, the Caribbeans, you're not taught, and I'm sure a lot are not taught. And I'll tell you a story about Accra as well in Ghana. Some of the things that they are not taught because we are following the colonial education system as well. So, do they feel that connection?
Not really. Right? It also depends on the country. So, being from Jamaica, Jamaicans are, and everyone you can attest to, we're Jamaican. Right? We don't even like to to associate with the rest of the Caribbean half the time. We're like, we're in Jamaica, there are a bunch of small islands. And that's kind of how it is depending on the island you're from. But that also, gives us a certain sense of self-worth in who we are. Some people might call it arrogance sometimes, but it allows us to, me personally, stand up strong in the face of everything that I have to deal with. And my curious nature as I got older, I got to learn more about what the connection is between being Jamaican and being African. I'll give you a classic example. Merlin might remember this. 2 years ago, for Melanistic Magazine, we were joking about which country makes the best sorrow. And if you know anything about sorrow in the Caribbean, Jamaica, we are very adamant that we make the best. Trinidad, they're very adamant that they make the best. And we're going to have a battle at the magazine. And Merlin was in the studio, Merlin chimed in, well, what about us from Nigeria? We make sorrow too. And we all kind of turned and looked at her like, what? So those are things that, we miss out on. I don't know.
Honestly, what Greg was saying is very, very similar. Like, it's just like, your intention, the connection is not really there. But I think, maybe one thing is that, just as for me personally speaking, this is a black person, I always think of, Africa as, a motherland. And so I'm always thinking, even though I'm from the Caribbean, Africa is a motherland. So it's something that, we always want to move back and go to just to see the roots. Whenever we say, I want to see our roots, usually it's to go back to Africa, right? So, but like Greg was saying, it's usually incidents and it's just, you're Vinci and that's it. You're Vinci or you're Jamaican, you're Trini or whatever. That's just kind of what it is. So the connection is not really there as much.
And also, like you referenced Marcus Garvey. Well, in Jamaica, he's one of our national heroes.
Yeah.
However, the colonial view of Marcus Garvey for years, we're not actually taught what Marcus Garvey was about in schools in Jamaica. There are Americans that know more about Marcus Garvey than me, right? Bob Marley's another classic example. Growing up, we're taught, don't listen to that music, he doesn't know what he's talking about, he's a dread, you're supposed to be Christian. But then as you get older, you're like, man, that guy was smart, he was talking about some stuff. Right? So.
Any thoughts from you about
Yeah, I think my thoughts are slightly different because I was born and raised in Africa. So when I see a documentary that Miriam has put together, it reminds me of a sense of identity and kind of relating it to the Caribbean perspective that you've all mentioned. I don't know if you're all from the Caribbean. Okay. So it almost makes me think of how history is always written from the perspective of the conqueror, and also how unity is extremely powerful. So people, even amongst our individual cultures and countries, when we're not united, there's a sense of conquering strength there too, right? Like when you mentioned how Jamaicans are really proud, I'm Ethiopian, we're very proud too. But I think there's something to take away from being united and how strong we can be united. For me, I have a strong sense of my identity and who I am and my culture, but I think that separation from motherland Africa that Akil mentioned to the Caribbean or across the Atlantic, and that separation I think is up to us to make that mend, because it's always divide and conquer from the other perspective, right?
Ironically, though, you being Ethiopian,
You want the mic?
you being Jamaican,
It's okay.
and him being Jamaican, there is a subset, the Rastas,
Yeah.
right? And that is a connection that wasn't made. And they do look back to Africa, specifically Ethiopia, where Haile Selassie, right? So I just wanted to say that there is still a subset of belief that does look back to Africa for its driving passion and sensibilities, as opposed to looking towards Christianity or other belief systems. Yeah.
That's a good, that's a great point. Now, as we are talking about being black or being, like just having that identity, I know you work with a lot of young people, and clearly as a young person, sorry, and you are also there. I don't know about yeah, so I just wanted to find out, having listened here, do black youth have a sense of racial identity, or do they think being black is a deficit? In communities or conversations that you have amongst your friends, do they think that being black is a deficit because of things that happen around?
There's a couple things. First, one of the things that I do have to do, I've been obliged to do this. I do work for school board in Edmonton, but I am here on my own court enacting the words that I say are of my own agency. When I think about the youth that I have worked with, so I've been an educator for 22 years in Edmonton, and I've seen a lot. So we've seen really the acculturation of people of dark skin really wanting to project themselves as white. And I'm very much a byproduct of that, having grown up in Millwoods, never seen a huge amount of pride in color. As I started moving into my work as an educator, I worked predominantly with high school students in the south side of Edmonton. And initially what we would see would be, as often as possible to try to adopt more and more white ways up until we start to see, the influence of pop culture, the influence of rap, and the influence of a lot of American relationship to identity. And so the piece of pride did start to actually come up. Now, the problem with all this is that most youth, and especially because they're very young-minded and influential in thinking, adopt black culture. And black culture tends to be American black culture. It tends to be social black culture. They don't necessarily adopt their own culture of black or blackness. So one of the things I have a huge amount of appreciation for our youth, and I give a huge amount of credit to my panelist, Greg. Kerry West Festival had just wrapped up last week. We see a huge celebration of cultural identity, not just simply black culture. Heritage Days in Edmonton is also another fantastic example of this. What I believe I have noticed in terms of transformation is it kind of seems to be a little bit of an evolution where youth go through adoption of being black again, like the acceptance and the pride of that. And then as they are really recognizing the importance of that, there then tends to be home basing, where you're saying, this is where I come from, like this is my national roots, and a huge amount of pride will then kind of pour from there too. But the work that I do, I work really hard with youth to not just see themselves as belonging to the skin color, and for them to also understand that black is not an adjective, right? It is our community, but our community is actually only enriched by all of the different thread that weaves the fabric, and all of us are slightly different depending on where we come from. And even within that, many nations exist within these countries, and so it is very, very rich. But I think that becomes an evolution of individuals where, as youth, they start out young-minded in thinking, but by the time we get to experts like our panelist here, who is in school, or have you graduated?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, so, yes. So you have much broader thinking about that than simply belonging to the larger diaspora.
Well said.
I agree a lot with Gil's sayings, because I think that, I guess in my perspective, what I think is that, like, for me, in my racial identity, I'm very proud to be black, right? But not only black, but also the dissension. But that's because I think it would have been different, like, if I grew up in the Caribbean. So, like, I was surrounded by, like, the majority of what I'm seeing is black people. So it's like, I'm very proud to be black and from the Caribbean. And so then coming here, it's not I don't really feel like it's a deficit because everyone is back home is majority black, so it doesn't feel like a deficit. I think maybe if I was born here or like in America, like I think in America because of like the things that happen, you know, maybe the police and all those different things, it can be seen as a deficit because, you know, if I was in America right now and I was to get stopped by the cops, I'd be terrified, right? So like or even just how I feel like in terms of elevating or getting into certain positions of power, we have to maybe work a little bit harder to get into those places. So then I feel like it feels like a deficit, for at least for young people, for me, in my perspective.